Yes, Your Honor. State calls Jane Hansen.
Good morning. Headed to the witness chair, that red chair right up there on that stuff. Be careful of the step, please. Thank you. And before you sit down, if you please turn toward me carefully. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Okay. Go ahead and be seated. Ms. Hansen, it appears that you're a bit nervous. I'm sure you don't come to court every day.
No, this isn't my usual stomping grounds.
Okay. There are just a few rules when we're in the courtroom. Rather than have a conversation, there will be a question and answer this morning. So I'm going to ask you to please be very careful to make sure that either Mr. Maybanks or Mr. Harris finishes his question before you begin speaking, and he will do whichever is doing the questioning will make sure not to step on your answers. You're here so that we can hear what you have to tell us. So please concentrate. Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Maybanks?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Hansen, we'll start with some easy stuff, okay? Just tell us your name and spell it for the record, please.
Jane Hansen, Jane, Hansen.
Thank you. How old are you?
58.
And what is your current city of residence?
Plano, Texas.
How long have you lived in Plano, Texas?
I've had my house in Plano 12 years, but I've been in the Dallas-Fort Worth area since 1984.
Great. And what do you do down there for a living?
I'm a CPA, and I have a second profession as a realtor.
And how long have you held those two occupations?
CPA since 1984, and real estate since 2009.
Is that what you've pretty much done for the extent of your career then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to take you back to December 1979, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Where were you living at the time?
With my parents,
What city were you living at?
Cedar Rapids,
Right. What area of Cedar Rapids?
Northeast Side,
Where'd you go to high school?
Kennedy High School.
Were you going to Kennedy back in December of 1979?
Yes, I was.
How far away from Kennedy did you live?
It was about 2 miles.
And how old were you in December of 1979?
I was 17,
What grade were you in?
12th grade senior.
So you were a student at Kennedy at the time?
Yes.
Did you know another female at that time, 18-year-old Michelle Martinko?
Yes.
Okay. How did you know Michelle Martinko?
I had known her since elementary school as classmates.
And what elementary school did you go to together?
Kenwood.
Were you friends from the get-go?
We were friends in elementary school and always friendly classmates, and then became fairly close in high school when we started to have some common extracurricular activities. I'm sorry, that's a hard word to pronounce when I'm nervous.
Okay.
Choir, baton twirling, that sort of thing.
Sure. So you went to Kenwood together. Do you remember where you went to middle school?
Harding.
Okay. So in middle school, were you close, or did you not run in the same circles then?
I don't recall us being especially close, but friendly classmates.
Did that change then by the time you got to high school?
Yeah, then we became very tight.
You mentioned that the two of you were involved in some similar activities. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, we were in choir together. Starting in junior high, we were in women's chorale together. And then senior year, we both made concert choir. And that was kind of an honor because it was a challenge for the ladies to get in. There was a lot of competition.
Okay.
And in the spring of junior year, we were all involved in the production of Pippin, which is like a Broadway show that we did at the high school. Michelle was on the theater or the stage dancing, and I played the piccolo in the pit orchestra, and we all had a lot of friends who had different roles in that production. And then I got her on the baton twirling squad, so we were baton twirling at the football games fall year of 1979.
So both you and her were on the twirling squad?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many other kids were on that squad with you and her?
That year it was a 7-year squad, so the two of us and 5 other girls.
Was that an assignment or a role that you helped her get on?
I did. I helped her get on that. We kind of changed the tradition, the rules, to get her on.
Okay. That sounds interesting. So she made the squad along with you then?
Well, I had been on the squad.
Okay.
I was captain then.
Oh, okay.
And so I went to the band director along with Lynn Seitz, the other captain, and said, we want these girls on, even though it's a little different procedure than had been followed in previous years.
Jane, to your knowledge, at that time in December of 1979, was Michelle in a relationship with anybody?
I don't know that she was in an especially tight relationship at that point.
Okay. Let me ask you about a couple individuals and see if you know them. Do you know Mike Wyrick?
Yes, I know Mike very well. We were friends as well in high school. And Mike and I have continued to be friends, hung out even a little bit in college.
Okay. To your knowledge, was Mr. Wyrick in the play too?
Yes, he was active in Pippin and the choir.
Did he and Michelle ever become involved in a relationship, to your knowledge?
Yes, they were in a pretty significant relationship as far as high school relationships go.
Sure. How old was Mike? Was he in the same grade as you guys, or was
He was just 1 grade older.
To your knowledge, was Michelle still communicating with Mike or friends with him at the time in December of '79?
I believe so, but see, he had moved on to Iowa State, and she was still in high school, so 100 miles difference. I think just they kind of naturally parted, had other, things going on.
Sure. What about a fellow by the name of Andy Seidel? Do you know that name?
Mm-hmm. I know Andy's. I don't know Andy well. I know of Andy. Michelle dated him for quite a while, which I think shows that she tended to be loyal to guys just as she was loyal to her friends.
Okay. So to your knowledge, she had been involved in a relationship with Andy at some point in time too?
Oh, yes.
Okay. In December of 1979, were you aware of anyone that was that Michelle was in some kind of conflict with or feared from her safety?
No.
You're going to have some exhibits I want to show the witness. Okay. And Your Honor, I believe pursuant to discussions with defense counsel, there'll be a stipulation to the admissibility of these exhibits. There'll be 2A through 2H.
We'll acknowledge the stipulation, Your Honor, and have no objection to the receiving into evidence of exhibits 2A through 2H.
Thank you, Counselor. 2A through 2H will be received.
Thank you, Your Honor. Keep those in front of you for now, okay, Jane?
Sure will.
The first exhibit that you have there is been received into evidence as states 2A. And at this point in time, we'd like to permission to publish it for the jury, Your Honor.
You may.
Okay, Jane, who is depicted here in State's Exhibit 2A?
Michelle Martinko.
And Michelle, in this exhibit, is dressed in a kind of a black evening dress. Is it the type of attire Michelle would wear at times, or does this depict an appropriate picture for her from that time period?
Yes, she liked to dress up, and those were the type of dresses that were in style at the time.
Okay, let's go to State's Exhibit 2B. And who's depicted in State's Exhibit 2B? If you could just flip to the next one, Jane.
Yes, that's a posed picture of Michelle,
Okay.
looking more professional.
Okay. While State's Exhibit 2B is up here, I want to ask you a question about Michelle. And just generally, what kind of person was Michelle?
She was a very nice girl. She was loyal to her friends and her boyfriends. She was, she had good school attendance. She had good attendance at work. Her classmates enjoyed working with her. She had many close friends. She was good at studies and had planned to go to college. She had talked to me about wanting to go to Iowa State and had a particular interest in interior design.
Your Honor, may we encourage the witness to speak closely to the microphone?
Yes, please. We want to make sure
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Do I need to repeat any of that? No. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Would you describe Michelle as a friendly person?
Absolutely.
Would you describe her as an outgoing person?
She was outgoing when she was in her element.
Okay.
When we got involved in choir and baton twirling and theater, she was pretty enthusiastic. But I think in her day-to-day classes, she was a little more subdued.
Okay. If we could go to State's Exhibit 2C now.
Is that the next page?
Yep, that's the next one.
Mhm.
All right. You see that picture there?
Yeah.
Is that Michelle?
Yes, that is Michelle. That's one of her senior yearbook pictures. Uh-huh.
All right. Was Michelle, when we think about high school girls, was she the type of person that would gossip a lot or kind of engage in some of those teenage type behaviors?
Oddly enough, she was more mature than that and she didn't partake in that sort of thing. I think that comes from having an older sister and being friends with her mom. She just didn't go down that road very often that I recall at all.
Tell us what you know about her family dynamics.
Her sister was quite a bit older, so by the time we were in high school, she had moved out of the home and was married, and so they weren't sibling rivalries because they kind of had different things going on with the 12-year age difference. And she was very, very close. Michelle was very, very close to her mom. Like her mom was her best friend.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and go to the next one here, 2D.
Yeah, I like this one.
I guess tell us what knowledge you might have of this picture. Or
I don't know where this picture was taken, but the reason I like it is because she didn't wear her hair, flipped like Farrah Fawcett every day. So this was more her everyday look if she wasn't really dressed up.
Okay, all right, thank you. Would you say, I guess, as far as teenage girls go, was Michelle the type of person that would only talk to people in her circle, or would she associate with anyone?
She was friendly to all her classmates.
Did you see her take the time to talk to people that weren't part of her circle, or?
I have some examples if I'm allowed to elaborate.
Why don't you go ahead, yeah.
So recently on Facebook, someone reached out to me, a young man who said he wasn't popular in high school, but he had a particular class with her, and she always took the time to just chat with him, not flirt with him, but just chat with him and make him felt like he fit in. And
So is that something that you saw happen?
yeah, and it was like he expressed to me that it was important to him, and I would say that that's indicative of her personality and how she behaved at school.
Why don't we go to the next exhibit here, and this will be 2E.
Okay.
You mentioned something about twirling squad earlier?
Uh-huh, yep.
Okay. What kind of outfit does she have on there?
That is the outfit that we wore when we twirled fire, which was only 2 games. The other games we had little more majorette-looking dresses on. Traditional majorette dresses. But when we twirled fire, we had these little swimsuit kind of things, and we couldn't wear pantyhose, and this is obviously staged for photos because we couldn't have our hair down or wear hairspray. We were twirling fire, real fire. So, but Michelle had an adorable figure. She wore this better than I did for sure, and so she loved this and had some pictures taken with it.
All right, thank you, Jane. Why don't we go to the next one here? I think it's 2F. And do you see the one we're looking at now, Jane? Okay, who's that in the photo with her?
I believe that's Andy.
Okay, all right. And you talked a little bit already today about the fact that Michelle had a relationship with Andy, right?
Sure.
Right. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. I think it'd be 2G.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about this really quick here. All right. You see the way she's dressed in this?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you recall about the way that Michelle would dress up?
That's the way she would dress up for evening out. And she had that adorable little rabbit fur coat, and she'd do her hair up in what I refer to as the Farrah Fawcett flip, and she'd do her hair makeup and, wear a pretty dress. And that's very typical of how she'd dress up if she was going out,
Okay.
maybe to a dance hall or a date or a prom or the Christmas banquet, those sorts of things.
Based on your recollection of Michelle and the way she acted as you've described and the way she appeared, in your experience, was Michelle the type of girl that would sometimes attract the attention of older men?
I would say she was a head turner. I mean, she was something. She was a pretty girl. So I don't know if she really reacted to every man that approached her, but I don't doubt she was approached frequently.
Okay. We'll go ahead and take that down then here. I'm going to ask you some more questions, and let's go to the night of December 19th of 1979. Jane, do you recall that night?
Yes.
What were you doing that night?
That evening, we had a Christmas banquet at the Sheridan for the concert choir. So we were all dressed up, similar to Michelle, dressing up with our hair and makeup and pretty dresses and some high heels. It was an opportunity to get out of the high school and put on something a little more feminine.
How many people were in the concert choir, you remember?
You know, we were discussing that just recently, and I didn't add it up in the yearbook, but we had a really good music program at Kennedy, so I think we had something like 70 or 80 kids in the concert choir.
Were they all there that night at the concert choir banquet?
Well, I didn't do a roll call.
Right, well, it was busy.
I don't recall.
Were there a lot of kids there?
There are a lot of kids there. Yes, there are a lot of kids there.
Did you have an opportunity to come into contact with Michelle that night?
Yes. We talked that evening, and
Go ahead.
well, not all of us sat together. You know, we had certain close friends, and we all had friends throughout the choir. And so, to my recollection, I didn't actually sit at the dinner table with Michelle, but then when it got to be dessert, some of us shuffled around and found a table to get kind of the close handful of girls together. And then it was when we were leaving to the parking lot that we had a discussion.
First, want to ask you, did the two of you drive together or separately to the concert choir that night? Banquet, that is.
We did not drive together.
Was it a school night? Do you remember?
It was a school night.
And what had you planned to do that night after the banquet?
I had missed a couple days of school with like a cold flu, and I was going to go home and make up some homework.
So did you have an opportunity to run into Michelle then as you were leaving the concert choir banquet?
Yes, and we talked about if she could give me a ride home because Michelle's family and my family house are only about half a mile apart, and the girls that I had ridden with lived 2 miles up the street closer to the high school. So I thought, well, if Michelle could just drop me off, that'll save these girls having to drive out of their way. And but she said she wanted to go to the mall, and I told her I had some homework. So I needed to get home as soon as possible to catch up on my homework.
So Michelle, did Michelle give you a indication though as to her state of mind of where she was going to go that night?
I didn't get a real sense of that. You know, over the years I speculated things, but no, at the time, no, I didn't
I guess what my question was, did she tell you she was going to the mall that night?
She did tell me she was going to the mall, absolutely. She told me she was going to the mall and asked me if I'd go with her.
Where did Michelle work at that time, to your knowledge?
She worked at a clothing store at Lindale Mall. I believe it was called Brooks. And it was a like teenage or young 20s fashion type store. And that was the mall that close to where her parents lived and my parents live.
So the mall where she worked, was that on the other side of Cedar Rapids then?
Yes.
Okay. Were you familiar with Westdale Mall at that time?
Well, yeah, it just opened. I don't know if I had even been there yet. And so I was familiar with it, but that side of town wasn't, that would have been out of my way to go see it.
Did she ask you to go with her to the mall?
That night, yes.
Okay. Did you go with her?
No, I already explained I went home to do my homework.
Okay. I'm sorry. So you told her that you need to go home and get some homework done?
Yeah, I had missed a couple days being sick, some kind of Iowa cold flu bug.
What was she driving at the time? Do you remember?
Well, it was her family car that, all the pictures have shown, a big sedan.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness again? Your Honor. Talking to the microphone. The parties have also agreed to stipulate to the admissibility of State's Exhibit 4Z, or 4C, excuse me.
Correct. We have no objection.
4C will be received and made part of it.
Jane, do you see that exhibit in front of you that's been identified as 4C?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Permission to publish, Your Honor?
It's my understanding that's the car she was in that night, but I wasn't riding with her in it, so that's the extent I can testify.
That's okay. I actually haven't asked you a question yet about it. One second, Jane.
Okay.
We're just waiting for
I'll
our
wait.
picture to come up. Here you go. All right, Jane, to your knowledge, is this the car that Michelle Martinko was driving on around that time?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. All right. Jane, when was the last time that you saw Michelle?
Right when we were leaving the banquet and we were in the parking lot in the Sheraton, and kind of everybody was like kind of going to their cars because the banquet was over, and we had that discussion about she wanted to go to the mall, and I wanted to know if she could take me home since my other friends, it was going to be out of their way, and we just there were several of us gathered in the parking lot, and then we went about our own ways, and she went to the mall.
Was that the last time you saw her then?
That is correct.
Do you remember what her attire was that evening?
I don't remember a specific dress. I remember she had her rabbit fur coat on, that I always liked her rabbit fur coat, and that she had her hair done and the way she does it when she's really dressed. And, the high heels like we wore at that time, the 70s, high platform heels were still kind of the style. And yeah, so the specific dress I don't remember, but in general, yes.
Okay. Was she, we saw a picture earlier of a rabbit fur coat. Was that the one that she was wearing, to your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. And if you look behind you again, is that the rabbit fur coat that you recall her wearing that night?
Yes, sir.
And you said she had a dress on, but you don't specifically remember what kind.
Yes, sir. I couldn't tell you exactly what dress she had on.
Where did you go that night after the concert choir then?
Home to do my homework.
Did you get a call in the middle of the night?
I certainly did.
From who?
Michelle's mother.
How would you describe her mother's demeanor on the phone call when she called you?
She seemed panicked and frightened.
And had you had an opportunity to talk with Michelle's mom in the past and know what she normally would sound like?
I knew Michelle's mom from school activities and visiting the home, but I had never had an experience where she called at night, in the middle of the night, on a school night, and was worried about where Michelle was.
So when you talked to her, you described, and did she sound frantic or?
I felt like she did. She seemed concerned.
Did she ask you anything?
She asked me if I knew where Michelle was. First she asked me if Michelle was with me. Then did I know where Michelle was? Would I have any idea where Michelle would be?
Do you remember, and obviously she wasn't with you, right?
That's correct. She wasn't with me.
So you told her that you,
So I said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Martinko, I don't know.
do you remember the next day?
Oh, yeah.
What do you remember about the next day?
Well, starting with going to bed after the phone call, I just kind of thought in my mind, Michelle's in big trouble now. She met up with some guy, stayed out past her curfew, and I went to sleep. But I was concerned by her mother's tone of voice, so when I got up and prepared for school, I called the house and no one answered. So I thought, well, I guess everything's back to status quo because no one's answering the phone. But then when I got to school, I was still concerned. And so I started asking everyone I saw until one of the other baton twirlers told me what happened.
So did you learn that she had been found dead?
Mm-hmm. And then I went straight home.
Jane, so as a result of Michelle being found dead, then have you been questioned at times by law enforcement and prosecutors over the years?
Yeah, quite a few times.
Okay. My next question to you, Jane, is over here is the defendant in this case, Jerry Burns. He's sitting in the middle of the council table over there. Do you know Jerry Burns?
No.
That's all I have for now, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Hansen, you mentioned in your examination this morning that Michelle Martinko had a relationship with or was friends with a couple of men who you mentioned by name, Mike Wyrick and Andy Seidel. Were Ms. Martinko and Mr. Wyrick serious as a couple at times? And by serious, I mean serious boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yes, I believe they were exclusive while they were dating.
And it was Mr. Wyrick who was a year older than you, or a year older in school than Ms. Martinko.
That is correct.
And then he went off to Iowa State University, is that your understanding?
That's correct.
And did that lead to the breakup of Ms. Martinko and Mr. Wyrick?
Yes, I believe they just kind of drifted apart. I don't think there was like one blow-up incident where they were angry with each other, but it just naturally drifted apart because that's not, teenagers at that age, it's not natural necessarily to stay together when you're in different environments. 100 miles apart.
Understood. And her relationship with Mr. Seidel, was it also a serious relationship?
To my understanding, it was.
Did you spend time with Mr. Seidel and Ms. Martinko as a couple?
No, I didn't actually know. I didn't know Mr. Seidel personally. I knew of him. I know they went to a lot of proms, so she had a lot of pretty pictures with them, but I didn't personally know him the way I do. Mike, I personally knew because we were school friends, but Mike, Andy, I didn't personally know.
Did Ms. Martinko share with you any concerns that she had about her relationship with Mr. Seidel?
Well, there seemed to be some concern that he just wasn't quite getting over the relationship, but typical teenage love.
Understood. Ms. Hansen, turning to the night of the choir banquet at the Sheraton Hotel in Cedar Rapids, did you and Ms. Martinko leave the banquet early?
No, I think we left kind of when it was over and everybody else left.
Did you detect that Ms. Martinko was bored at the banquet?
I have no recollection of that.
When Ms. Martinko said that she was not going to give you a ride home or couldn't give you a ride home, I thought I had understood you to say that you had some suspicion about what she might want to do that night. Did I misunderstand you?
Yes, I think you misunderstood me. She may have asked me earlier in the week if I wanted to go do something else, and but when it came to that evening, specifically, I wanted to ride home to do my homework, and she was specifically going to the mall to do a quick errand, a little shopping to pick up a coat her mom had put on layaway. And I didn't want to go home I didn't want to go hang out at the mall. I wanted to go home. I was a straight A student, so I was a little kind of a stickler about getting my homework done.
Were there places that you and Ms. Martinko like to socialize in Cedar Rapids?
Sure.
And where were your favorite spots to go, and where did Ms. Martinko like to go?
We like to go to some drive-in movie theaters, and there's a place called the East Side Made Right that was kind of a Kennedy High School hangout. And, we'd go to the football games together all the time, all the football games since we were twirlers together. And, it was popular to cruise up and down First Avenue after the football games and, kind of like cruising Main Street back in the 1950s or something.
You may be interested to know that there are two very notorious one-ways in Davenport, Iowa. Ms. Hansen, did you and Ms. Martinko ever frequent a nightclub in Cedar Rapids called Gatsby's?
We've both been there. It wasn't my favorite hangout. I know she went there a few times. I couldn't attest to how often she went.
Sure. Would you describe her as being an overly cautious woman?
I think she was careful. It was at different times. We weren't worried about some of the things we had to be worried about before that incident. I mean, like both of us had retail jobs and would walk out to our cars after we were done with our retail job.
And you mentioned that Ms. Martinko worked at Brooks. Is that correct?
I believe it was Brooks. It was a Lindale Mall store that was a fashion store for young women.
And for those members of the jury who aren't familiar with Cedar Rapids, at that time there were two major malls or commercial outlets, and one was Lyndale Mall, which was on the east side of Cedar Rapids, and then Westdale Mall, not surprisingly, on the west side of Cedar Rapids. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Hansen. Those are all the questions I have for you.
Thank you.
Just briefly, Your Honor. Jane,
Yes.
based on your conversation with Michelle when you were leaving the concert choir, did you have any reason to believe that she was going anywhere other than Westdale Mall for this errand to pick up the coat her mom put on layaway?
No.
When Michelle, or if and when Michelle would talk about Andy Seidel, what would be her demeanor when she would talk about him? In what way would she talk about Andy?
Well, he had been a long-term boyfriend, so I think she had a lot of feelings for him, but she was a little bit annoyed that he didn't seem to be letting go when she had already had this long-term relationship with Mike, and I didn't think anything significant was going on there. She never expressed anything that appeared to me as significant worry.
Okay, and that was my question. Was she relatively nonchalant like a teenage girl would be about
Yeah.
that? Or okay.
Yeah,
Did she appear to be worried or concerned in any way?
sure.
Did she appear to be worried and concerned?
No, not really, just,
No.
no.
Okay. All right. That's all we have, Your Honor.
Additional cross-examination?
No more questions necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hansen.
Thank you.
Oh, I think back out this way, Jim.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Jeff White.
Mr. White, you're coming right over here to the witness chair. Please mind the stairs. Before you sit down, sir, please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
When you seated. And I'm going to just give you a couple of rules in the courtroom. We'll ask you to use that mic when you testify.
All right.
And make sure that you allow Mr. Harris to finish his question before you begin your answer.
Okay.
We do have a court reporter here, and her job is to take down each syllable that's spoken in this room. So we have to have one voice speaking.
Perfect.
All right? So please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
Jeffrey Charles White, Jeffrey, White.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. White. How are you doing today?
Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. Mr. White, where do you currently live?
I live in, well, right outside of Cedar Rapids, and it's actually a Toddville address.
And how long have you lived in the Cedar Rapids area?
Oh, geez. My wife and I moved back probably in the late 80s, early 90s.
What do you do for a living?
I sell heavy equipment.
How long have you been in that line of work?
Oh, I've been in construction sales for the last 30 years.
Mr. White, I'd like to ask you some questions about when you were younger. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Where did you attend high school?
Kennedy High School.
And is that Kennedy High School located in Cedar Rapids, Iowa?
Correct.
And what year did you graduate from Kennedy High School?
1980.
Okay. And Mr. White, I'll tell you, I'm going to do my best not to talk over you.
I'll be
but
careful.
Just wait till I'm done with my questions, because our court reporter here can only take down one person at a time, so. And sorry, could you repeat your last answer? What year did you graduate high school?
1980.
Okay. When you were in high school, what kind of activities were you involved in, or what kind of student were you?
I was a pretty decent student. I was involved in some sports, baseball, and then also choir was probably one of my biggest things.
Okay.
So.
How many years of high school were you involved in choir?
3 years.
Okay.
Yes.
And now is when you say you were involved in choir, is that just kind of a solo endeavor, or were there different types of choirs or different groups that you could be involved in?
Yeah, we had a concert choir, and then we also had a well, back then it was called swing choir, but now it's a show choir, and it was called Happiness Incorporated, and I was involved in that as well.
Okay. Now, while you were in high school, did you know an individual named Michelle Martinko?
I did.
Okay. And how did you know Michelle?
I knew her through the choir activities.
Okay. Were you in the same grade as Michelle?
Yes.
And did you attend school with Michelle prior to high school?
Junior high, which was, back then, that was 9th grade. She went to Harding, as did I. I moved to Cedar Rapids halfway through my freshman year.
Okay. Would you have considered yourself friends with Michelle Martinko?
I would say more acquaintances.
Okay. As an acquaintance of Miss Martinko, how often would you see her around school, or how often would you interact with her?
Well, early on in high school, I would see her, and, obviously we knew each other. We would say hi. I got to know her a lot better my senior year because we were both a little more active, I think, in choir, and the group was kind of getting a little tighter. So I would see her every day.
Okay. How would you describe Michelle's personality?
She was a real sweet girl, extremely friendly, not extremely outgoing, but very, very friendly.
Now, Mr. White, I want to point you to a certain date, December 19th, 1979. Do you recall that date?
I do.
Now, on December 19th, 1979, would that have been your, first semester of senior year?
Yes,
Did you attend a school function that evening?
I did.
Okay. And what was that school function?
That was just an annual choir banquet for concert choir.
Where was that held?
It was held at the Sheraton.
Okay. Is it Sheraton, located in Cedar Rapids, Iowa?
Yeah, down on 33rd Avenue.
Okay. Now, for everyone here who's not familiar with Cedar Rapids,
So,
generally,
yes.
generally speaking, I guess, where in Cedar Rapids is that? On the
The-
east side or the west side?
Southwest side.
Okay, thank you. And you may have already said this, but what was the banquet for?
Just our annual choir banquet.
Okay. Do you recall how many people were in attendance?
That's a tough one. I'm going to say probably 50 to 60, maybe.
Okay. And was this the type of function that people dressed up for?
Yes.
Okay. You recall what you were wearing that night?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, a tweed, like everybody had. I had a tweed sport coat with, the old leather patches and a tie.
Okay. Do you still have that sport coat?
I do not, no.
That's unfortunate. Okay. Mr. White, do you recall seeing Michelle Martinko at that banquet?
Yes.
Okay. Did you speak with her that night?
Yes.
Okay. Did you speak with her at the banquet?
Yes.
Okay. What was Michelle wearing to the banquet on December 19th, 1979?
She had on a black dress, is what I remember. And her coat always stuck out to me. She had a fur coat that she was wearing that night. It was cold, so she had that on quite a bit. But that's all I remember is a black dress and a fur coat.
Thank you. Your Honor, permission to publish a previously admitted exhibit. Mr. White, I'm going to have you refer to the screen behind you here. This is previously admitted as State's Exhibit 2G. is it fair to say that this is a similar, or maybe even the coat that you remember Michelle wearing that evening?
Yes,
Okay. And I believe you said she was also wearing a black dress.
correct.
So is this similar to how Michelle looked on the night of December 19th, 1979?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, you mentioned speaking with Michelle at the banquet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you talk with her about?
I don't remember in depth. I mean, just small talk, because obviously we were just making our way around talking to all our classmates. I did talk to her, and she did tell us that she was going to Westdale. I was with a buddy of mine at that time, and she was going to head out to Westdale Mall.
Okay, so you were aware she was going to be heading towards Westdale Mall.
Yes.
Were you familiar with the vehicle that Michelle Martinko drove?
Yeah.
Okay, can you describe it to the best of your recollection?
Boy, it was I think it was a big old Buick. I don't know what year, but light-colored.
Your Honor, permission to republish a previously admitted exhibit. Mr. White, again, I'm going to have you look behind you once the screen pops on. This is State's Exhibit 4C. Is this the vehicle that you remember Michelle Martinko driving?
Absolutely.
Okay, and this would have been the vehicle that she was driving on the night of December 19th, 1979?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall seeing Michelle in the parking lot of the Sheraton after the banquet?
Yes.
Okay. And then you might have said this already. Again, I apologize, but what were your plans for after the banquet?
I was with, like I said, a friend of mine, and we were going to head over to Westdale as well.
Okay. What was your purpose for going to Westdale Mall?
Shopping. I was always a procrastinator, so I had to get some Christmas shopping done, and we were just, the mall was brand new at that time, and so we were just going to go out and hang out with friends.
Okay. So this was about 6 days before Christmas, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You still wait that long to
I
purchase
do,
Christmas
yes.
presents?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at the time, Westdale Mall had only recently opened, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is it fair to say that, as a high school teenager, it was kind of the thing to do to go check out the new mall?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you recall what time you arrived at the mall?
Best of my recollection would be around 7:45-ish.
Okay. Now, this would have been obviously after the banquet
Correct.
Finished up.
Yes.
And do you remember staying at the banquet until it had finished?
Yes.
Okay. And then from the banquet, did you stop anywhere? Or did you go directly to the mall?
We went directly to the mall.
Okay. And believe you arrived there somewhere around 7:45?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, permission to approach the witness?
You may.
We're good for now, thank you.
And, Your Honor, I believe by previous stipulation with counsel, this State's Exhibits 1A and 1B will be admitted without objection.
And admitted without objection, yes.
1A and 1B will be received and made part of the record.
Mr. White, I might have you stand up and step off the witness stand. And if you could come down and take a look at this rather large map that I've placed in front of you. And if you need a second to familiarize yourself with it.
Okay.
Now, would this be a map of Westdale Mall in Cedar Rapids, Iowa?
Yes.
And I guess I should clarify, Westdale Mall as it appeared in 1979.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you got to Westdale Mall, can you show us in the parking lot where it is that you drove and where you parked?
Yeah, let's see, because Wilson would be up here. Yeah, I believe we came down, and I believe we came in. Boy, it's changing.
He needs to speak up just a little.
Okay.
I believe we came in this entrance here, and we drove, because I always parked right in this area. And so I remember driving through that night, and the mall itself, there were not a lot of parking spots. And so we drove around for a few, well, actually for a little while. We did find a spot, which is gonna be actually roughly right in this area.
Okay. And here, I'm going to point out a few items to you. Now, Mr. White, on the map here, what this large kind of white area, this white store here, what store is that?
That's JCPenney.
And were there entrances into the mall near JCPenney?
Yes,
Did that have any bearing on why you parked in that location?
yes.
You can go back up to the stand. Now, Mr. White, did you see Michelle once you were at Westdale Mall?
Yes.
Okay, and where did you see her?
Saw her first because she pulled out of the Sheraton in front of us. And so obviously she was just, heading over to the same place. We saw her in her car looking for a spot as well.
Okay, and would that have been as you arrived at the mall initially?
Yes,
Okay, and again, you'd previously seen her get in her vehicle at the Sheraton,
correct.
so you're familiar with the vehicle that she was driving, and then you saw that vehicle again at Westdale Mall.
Yes,
Okay, and you recall seeing Michelle driving that vehicle?
I do.
Okay. So it's fair to say that Michelle would have arrived at the mall at roughly the same time that you did that evening.
Yes.
Once you found a place to park, which sounds like it was no small feat, did you go inside the mall?
We did.
Okay. Do you recall where you went inside the mall or what your plans were?
Well, I was shopping for a Christmas present for my parents. So we went to I cannot remember the name of the store. It was a kitchen store. I know that Bob and I went to the Athlete's Foot to look at some tennis shoes to give my parents some ideas for me. My girlfriend at the time managed a store in Westdale, and so we went and visited with her and her manager for a while that night also.
Did you see anyone you knew or any fellow high school students at the mall?
I did.
And
I did.
who was that?
Well, I saw Tracy Price. I saw Todd Bergen. I saw Marty Miller. I believe Tammy Benzing and Jane. No, not Jane. Tammy Benzing. And saw a couple other girls, but that's so long ago.
At any point while you were inside the mall, did you see Michelle Martinko?
I've thought long and hard about this, and, I did see Michelle talking to Tracy and Todd, that group,
Okay.
just from a distance.
Did you speak with Michelle at all?
Not at all.
Okay. Besides for that one time when you saw her speaking with that group, did you see her at any other place in the mall?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. White. No further questions at this time.
Great.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spies.
Briefly, good morning, Mr. White.
Good morning.
Mr. White, the mall that you've described in the government's exhibit there in front of you was a large regional mall, probably the biggest in eastern Iowa.
Correct.
And in addition to having anchor stores like Penny's and and Yonkers, I think Ward's and Sears were also there, right?
Correct.
And then interspersed throughout the mall were smaller boutique or unique shops.
Yes,
Also eating establishments in the mall?
yes.
Can you remember any of the eating establishments in the mall?
Oh, sure. There was an Orange Julius, I believe, back then. Bishop's, Chick-fil-A. There was a pizza place, which I cannot remember the name of that place. Yeah, there were quite a few. A pretzel place.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you were, when you arrived at the parking lot of the shopping mall, that it took some time for you to find a place to park.
Right.
So the week before Christmas, was it a busy night?
Yes.
And as you left the mall after you and your companion had done or attempted to do your Christmas shopping, did you have a hard time finding your car?
Yes.
It was buried among other cars parked in the lot.
Yeah, we went out a different, well, we left from a different entrance than, obviously that we came in. And so we had a hard time finding our car because we were coming from the opposite end of the mall, walking back.
And I
Yes.
apologize if this was asked by government's counsel, but do you remember about what time you left the mall?
It was right around closing time because we stopped in to see my girlfriend, and it would have been, and I think they closed at 9 o'clock back then, so it would have been right around 9 o'clock.
Whatever closing time was.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Redirect Mr. Harris.
Just briefly, Your Honor. Mr. White, I had asked you some questions about when you arrived at Westdale Mall and having seen Michelle in the parking lot. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Could you show us on the map where you recall seeing her or seeing her vehicle?
Yeah, because we were looking for spots all along this area here, and we passed her doing the exact same thing. So it would have been right in this area in here.
Okay. And Mr. White, just so we kind of have a verbal record of where you're pointing at, would that be in the area labeled on the map as the lower parking lot, or the lower parking area, excuse me?
Correct.
And just above that and kind of diagonal from where J.C. Penney is located?
Yes.
Okay, and that's where you saw Michelle Martinko in the parking lot?
Yes. Her and the other kids, we saw multiple people we knew all kind of circling in the same area.
Okay. Did you ever see where she parked?
I did not.
Okay, so you just saw her circling in that area near J.C. Penney in the lower parking area? Okay, thank you. You can retake the stand. As you were leaving the banquet at the Sheraton and you saw Michelle in the parking lot, do you recall if she was with anybody?
She was not.
Okay, so she was alone at that time?
Correct.
And then when you saw her again at Westdale Mall in the parking lot, was she with anybody in her vehicle at that point?
No.
Okay, so she was alone?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Additional cross-examination.
Nothing else. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. White. You may step down. State may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Dr. Martin Miller.
Good morning, Dr. Miller. You're headed right over here to the witness chair. Before you sit down, I would ask you to pause and raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Go ahead and be seated. I'm going to give you just a couple of rules for your testimony this morning. Many times in conversation, we will step on the end of the sentence of the person we're conversing with. In the courtroom, we can't do that. We need to make sure that you allow the attorney to finish the question before you begin your answer, even if you know where that question is going.
Okay.
And they'll do the same for you, and we'll ask you to use that mic so that everyone can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, so please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
It's Martin Wayne Miller. Martin, Martin, Miller, Miller.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to get just a little bit closer to that mic or bring it to you, whichever, you can, there you go. Thank you. You may proceed with your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Miller. How are you?
Good, fine.
Okay. Could you please tell us where you currently live?
In Jefferson, Iowa,
And how long have you lived in Jefferson, Iowa?
31 years.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a chiropractor.
Okay. Now, Dr. Miller, I would like to ask you some questions from when you were younger. Would that be all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
Cedar Rapids.
Okay. Were you born in Cedar Rapids?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Or I guess I should ask you, where did you attend school in Cedar Rapids?
Well, Kennedy High School.
Okay. And if you can remember, how many students were at Kennedy High School when you were there?
Probably 1,500 or a little more.
And I think I understand that Kennedy High School was comprised of 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Correct.
Okay, so roughly 500 students in your class?
Yes.
And what year did you graduate?
1981.
What kind of activities were you involved in during high school?
Sports and music, swing choir, concert choir. I did band my first year, cross-country, track, swimming.
You mentioned that you were involved in some various choirs.
Yes.
What years did you participate in those?
I was in the concert choir all 3 years and in the swing choir all 3 years.
Dr. Miller, did you know an individual named Michelle Martinko?
Yes.
Okay. Were you in the same grade as Michelle Martinko?
No.
How is it that you knew her?
I originally met her in a play my first year, a sophomore year. Pippin. That's when I first met her.
Okay. What role did you have in Pippin?
Just a choir member.
Okay. And so you were a sophomore at that time?
Yes.
And what year was Michelle?
She was a year older than me.
So she would have been a junior when you initially met her during that production of Pippin?
Yes.
Okay. Were you involved in any other activities with her as you moved through high school?
No.
Okay. How about any of the various choirs or anything like that?
Well, if she was in concert choir, then I was with her in that as well.
Okay. Now, going back to when you first met Michelle during your sophomore year, do you recall if you interacted with her or talked with her at all during that play?
Just briefly, you know, when you're waiting between scenes, you'd be sitting in the auditorium and have casual conversations. Meetings in the hall, just hi and bye kind of things.
Okay. How would you describe Michelle's personality?
Michelle is one of the nicest people I've ever met. She's just very, very kind, always had a smile, always upbeat, always dressed impeccably, never looking down on, you know, a younger classman, just very nice.
Okay. I have to imagine as somebody who was an underclassman to her, maybe there's
Yeah.
a certain thrill with talking to
Absolutely.
an upperclassman,
Yes, sir.
and she was always willing to do that.
Mhm.
Now, Dr. Miller, I want to talk to you specifically about December 19th of 1979. Would that be okay?
Yes,
Okay. What year in school were you in December of 1979?
I was a junior.
Do you recall attending a school function that evening?
Yes,
What was that function?
it was a choir banquet,
Where was that banquet held?
the Sheraton Hotel.
Now, as I understand it, there's a lot of different kinds of choirs, so was this for, did it run the gamut of all the different choirs, or was there a
I had trouble
speci-
remembering that, but I think it's just the concert choir,
Okay, and do you recall how many people were at this banquet?
roughly 80.
Okay. And this was a dinner banquet, correct?
Yes.
What type of clothing were people wearing for this banquet?
We were as dressed up as we could get, three-piece suits and dresses and, yeah,
Were you in a three-piece suit that night?
yes,
Okay. And would this have been a banquet that Michelle Martinko would have attended?
yes,
Do you recall seeing her at the banquet?
yes,
Okay. Did you speak with her that night?
no. Well,
Okay.
not at the banquet.
Not at the banquet, and we'll get to later, a little later on. So you saw Michelle Martinko at the banquet that night, but you didn't speak with her?
Correct.
And how long did this banquet last?
Hour and a half?
Okay.
Maybe
Fair
two.
to say it was, you had a meal and then it broke up after that?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any particular plans for after the banquet?
Yes, we planned on going to a movie.
Do you remember what movie it was? I'm testing you now.
The Jerk,
Okay.
Steve Martin.
Who were you going to go to that movie with?
Tracy Price, Todd Bergen, and Stu Gibson.
Okay. These were friends of yours from high school, I imagine?
Yes,
Okay. Were these all members of, or all people who had attended the banquet also?
yes.
Okay. How is it that you were going to get from the banquet to the movie?
Tracy Price, he was a senior. He had a limousine. It was kind of fun to have a high school kid with a limousine. And so he picked Todd Bergen and myself up at our houses and then drove us to the banquet.
And then he also drove after the banquet?
Yes,
Now, do you recall where the movie was that you were going to go see?
at the Stage 4 Theater.
Okay, and is that in Cedar Rapids, Iowa?
Yes,
Now, and do you recall what time the movie was going to be at?
no, but it was a late one.
Okay. Before going to the movie, did you go anywhere first?
I think we went to the theater just to see what was going on, what time it was going to be, and then we just went to the mall.
Okay, so you stopped at the theater,
I think so.
and then from there you went to Westdale Mall.
Yeah, to kill some time.
Do you have a recollection of what time you would have arrived at Westdale Mall?
Maybe around 8:30,
Okay.
maybe a little before.
And what was your reason for going to the mall?
Everybody went to the mall. It was brand new. And it was Christmas time, just a place to hang out, walk around, get out of the cold.
Did you see Michelle Martinko at the mall that night?
Yes,
Do you recall how long you had been at the mall before you saw Michelle?
maybe up to a half hour.
Okay. Your Honor, if I may approach the witness.
You may.
Dr. Miller, I'm going to have you step down off the witness stand. And I'm showing you what has previously been marked as Exhibit 1A. Now, if you want to take a second to just kind of familiarize yourself with it, is this, or can you describe what it is that you're looking at here?
Yeah, this is Westdale Mall and Edgewood Road.
Okay. Is this generally what Westdale Mall would have looked like in 1979?
Yes.
Now, labeled inside Westdale Mall are various stores. Are you able to read that writing? It's kind of small.
Yes.
Are those stores that you recall being at Westdale Mall in 1979?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you and Tracy and Price and Todd Bergen and Stu Gibson got to the mall, do you recall where it is you entered the mall?
I believe it is up in this area.
Okay, and you are pointing at the upper parking area?
Yes.
Where did you go once you went inside the mall?
Just started cruising.
Gotcha.
Walking
Because that was the thing to do as a teenager, just to hang out. All right, that's fair. Now, where was it that you saw Michelle Martinko?
Down this area?
Could I have you point to that again? And you're pointing to the area on the map, generally speaking, Paul Harris, store, the closet. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay. If you'd like to step back up to the stand, you can take a seat, Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller, when you saw Michelle Martinko, was she with anyone?
No.
Okay. Do you recall what she was wearing?
Yes.
Could you please describe to us what she was wearing?
It was a black dress, probably knee length, and like a white rabbit fur coat.
Dr. Miller, if you can refer to the screen behind you, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 2G. It shows Michelle Martinko wearing a what appears to be a white rabbit fur coat. Is this a similar or even the same coat that you saw her wearing that night?
I believe so.
Okay. Did you speak with Michelle Martinko while you were at the mall?
Yes.
Do you recall what you talked with her about?
Yeah, first we just said hellos and then asked what she was doing there, and she said she was looking for a coat that her mother put on layaway, that she was having difficulty finding it. We casually just asked her if she wanted to go to the movie with us, because we had plenty of room in the limousine, and she said no.
Okay. Now, she mentioned that she was looking for a coat and she was having trouble finding it.
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall speaking with her or helping her contact her parents?
She asked me for a dime, and I gave it to her so she could use the payphone.
Okay. How long did this conversation last?
A minute,
Okay.
2.
Do you remember how the conversation ended?
No, I don't.
Now, how was Michelle acting at the time?
Just frustrated, I think tired. She seemed like it was the end of the day for her, and she was going to head home, and I know she was going to try to contact her mother. It was shortly before 9 o'clock, and she wanted to get the coat before it closed.
Okay. Now, in your interactions with her while you were talking with her that night, did she seem scared at all?
No,
Did she seem concerned?
no,
Okay. Besides for the fact that she may have been frustrated about not being able to find this coat, did she seem upset or out of sorts?
no.
After this conversation ended, did everybody kind of go their own separate ways?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you see Michelle again in the mall that night?
No.
Do you recall how much longer you were at the mall?
Very little.
Okay.
Yeah, it was close to 9 o'clock. It's time to get out of the mall.
And after that, you headed over to the movie?
Yes, sir.
And you went to the movie with Tracy Price and Todd Bergen and Stu Gibson?
Correct.
What is your best estimate as to when you saw Michelle at the mall?
Probably 8:50, 8:45, 8:50.
Somewhere in that time
Yeah,
frame?
it's close to closing.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Miller. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
Very briefly, good morning, Dr. Miller.
Good morning.
Doctor, at any time did you see where Michelle Martinko had parked her car?
No.
Thank you. That's all I have for you.
Anything further? Mr.
No
Harris?
further questions.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. Would the state like to call its next witness?
Certainly, Your Honor. The state calls Tracy Price.
Good morning, sir. You're headed right over here to the red chair. That's the witness chair. Mike is done. Before you sit, please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Go ahead and be seated. Just a couple of rules when we're in the courtroom. It's important to make sure that only one voice speaks at a time. The attorneys will be asking you some questions, and I would ask you to be very mindful and allow them to finish before you begin to answer. Even if you know where the question is going, let there be just a little bit of space between their question before you begin your answer.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
My name is Tracy Price, Tracy, and Price.
Thank you, sir. You may begin your examination, Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Price, I was going to point out you have a microphone in front of you.
Yep.
Just make sure you're close enough to it so we can all hear you. Mr. Price, what do you do for a living?
I work at Discovery Living. So I work with individuals with intellectual disabilities.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
I'd say for about a total of 10 years now.
Okay. Is that work you enjoy?
It is. It's very rewarding.
That sounds like it. Now, Mr. Price, I want to ask you some questions about when you were younger. Would that be all right?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
In Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Okay. Could you kind of walk us through where you went to school in Cedar Rapids, Iowa?
Sure. I grew up on the northeast side. I went to school at Kenwood Elementary. Then I went to Harding Junior High School, and then Kennedy High School.
Okay. And what year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in 1980.
Now, thinking back to high school, what kind of student were you? What kind of activities were you involved in?
I was very involved in the music department and theater department.
Any specific groups or any specific courses you were on?
No, not at the time. Just a lot, focused mainly in the music department.
Okay. Mr. Price, did you know Michelle Martinko?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Were you in the same grade as Michelle?
Yes, I was.
And how is it that you knew Michelle Martinko?
Well, Michelle also went to school at Kenwood, and then Harding, and then Kennedy.
So you attended school with her from elementary school up until high school. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
Would you say you were friends with Michelle Martinko?
Yes, I would say that we were.
Okay. Were you in any of the same activities?
Yes, she was also involved in music and theater.
Now, Mr. Price, could you please describe Michelle Martinko's personality?
Always seemed to be a happy individual, nice. I think a little bit on the quiet side.
How did she treat other people in school?
She was always kind to me.
Did you see her kind to other people as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Mr. Price, I'd like to focus your attention to December 19th of 1979. Do you recall that day?
I do.
Okay. Now, at that time, would that have been the first semester of your senior year?
Yes.
And did you have some type of school function that you went to that evening?
There was a music department Christmas or holiday banquet at the Sheraton.
Okay. That's the Sheraton in Cedar Rapids?
Correct, the Sheraton Hotel on 33rd Avenue.
How many people were at this gathering?
Well, it was the music department, so I'd imagine there were 150 people. someone.
Okay. Was this the type of function that people would dress up for?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall what you were wearing that evening?
No.
Okay. Would this have been a function that Michelle Martinko would have attended?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall seeing Michelle Martinko there that night?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall what Michelle Martinko was wearing that evening?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe it to us?
It was a black dress, and at that point in time in the 70s, rabbit coats were popular, so she had I believe it's a calico rabbit coat.
Okay, now shortly, Mr. Price, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 2G, and it's going to pop up on the screen behind you.
Yes.
Is that a picture of Michelle Martinko?
Yes.
And would that be the rabbit fur coat that you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay, the coat that you saw her wearing that evening?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry if I already asked this, but do you recall speaking with Michelle Martinko at the banquet?
No, I don't recall, but it's quite possible.
Okay. What were your plans for after the banquet?
A group of friends, we had decided that we were going to go see a movie at the Stage 4 Theater.
Who was in that group of friends?
It was Todd Bergen, Marty Miller, and Stu.
Okay. And what was the plan, or how were you going to get from the banquet to the theater?
My car.
Okay.
I was going to drive.
What kind of car did you have at the time? I think you knew you were going to get asked this question.
Yeah. It was a 1969 Cadillac limousine.
Okay. Not your typical high school car.
No.
Okay. Imagine you were proud of that car.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't still have it, do you?
No.
Okay.
Hindsight.
Okay. So from the banquet, where did you go immediately after the banquet?
From there we went to the theater to secure the tickets.
Okay. What theater was that?
Stage 4 by Kmart West.
Okay. In Cedar Rapids?
Yes.
And then once you secured the tickets, was the show not starting for a while?
Right. We still had some time to kill.
Okay. So what did you do at that point?
We went over to Westdale.
Okay. And that would be Westdale Mall?
Yes.
Do you recall what time you got to Westdale Mall?
Probably somewhere around 7 o'clock-ish.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Okay, now, Mr. Price, if you could step down off the witness stand, and I hope I gave you enough room to get through there. And I am showing you State's Exhibit 1A, and if you need a second to familiarize yourself with it, that's okay. You think you got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Could you please describe what we're looking at here?
It's a top view of Westdale Mall.
Okay. And is this Westdale Mall how you would have remembered it in 1979?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you arrived at Westdale Mall with Todd Bergen and Marty Miller and Stu, do you recall where it is you went into the mall?
We went in the entrance down here by Yonkers.
Okay. And then, do you recall where you went once you were inside the mall?
We started walking inside, and we went up to, we went into B. Dalton's.
Okay. As you were moving through the mall, did you see any students, fellow students, or anybody that you knew?
When we came back out of B. Dalton's, we ran into Michelle
Okay.
out there.
Could you show us on the map where about it was that you ran into Michelle Martinko?
I would say it was right around in here.
Okay. And just so we have a record of it, you were pointing at this area outside the stores as they're marked on the exhibit of Paul Harris, Noble Shoes, Limited. Would that be fair to say that's where you saw her? And who were you with at that time?
Was with Marty and Marty Miller, Stu, and Todd Bergen.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Price. You can retake the stand. Now, when you saw Michelle Martinko, was she with anybody?
No.
Okay. Did you stop and talk with her?
Yes.
Okay. What did you talk about?
Well, of course, just greeted her, and then she explained that she was trying to find a coat that her mom had put on layaway for her.
Okay. Do you remember if she had been able to find that coat or not?
No, she seemed to be a little confused as to which store it was in.
Okay.
So she was out there looking to put money down on the coat.
Okay. And how long did this conversation last?
Probably just a few minutes.
Okay. Anything else from the conversation that you remember?
No.
Okay. How did the conversation end?
Well, actually, a couple of guys decided that they had to go to the bathroom, so they left, and then we went in with her to one of the stores to see if her coat may be on layaway in there.
Was she successful in finding her coat when she went to that store?
No.
Okay. After you left that store, how much longer were you with Miss Martinko?
Probably just a few more minutes.
Okay. And then you parted ways?
Yes.
Okay. Now, during this time that you were with Michelle, again, she wasn't with anybody else, was she?
I think about the time that we did come out of the store, a friend of hers and a friend of his, we did run into them out in the mall.
And did you know either of those individuals?
Just kind of through conversation, I found out that Andy was her boyfriend or former boyfriend at the time.
Okay. And when you say Andy, are you referring to Andy Seidel?
Yes.
So while you were speaking with Michelle, Andy Seidel and a friend of his came up to talk with her as well?
Right.
Okay. Now, while you were talking with Michelle, did anything seem out of the ordinary?
No, I didn't get that impression at all.
Did she seem like she was scared at all?
No.
Did she seem concerned?
Nope.
Did she seem upset?
No.
I guess if you were to describe your conversation or interaction with her, did everything just seem kind of typical?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pretty lighthearted.
Okay. Now, when you parted ways with Michelle, do you recall how much longer you stayed at the mall?
We went up to Evie's, which was all the way down at the other end of the mall by J.C. Penney, and Marty had said that his girlfriend purchased him a sweatsuit, so we went down and he showed us that, and then we headed all the way back the other direction to the car.
Yeah. And shortly after that, you went to the movie?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see Michelle again at any point after you had parted ways from your earlier conversation?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Price. No further questions at this time.
Thank you.
Yes, just briefly. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
This is late mid-December 1979. It was cold out that night, wasn't it?
Yes.
And notwithstanding what you were wearing, Michelle Martinko was wearing this I think you call it like a calico fur coat,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes,
And was she wearing that coat inside the mall as well?
yes.
When you went to this store with her looking for the coat that she was looking for, did she show you some money?
Actually, she showed, when we came back out of the store, she showed us, she had a wad of bills, and that's what she was gonna put towards the dress, or the coat that she was looking for.
At any time when you and your distinctive automobile pulled into the Westdale Mall parking lot, did you see her car in that parking lot?
No,
So I take it from that you didn't see her enter the parking lot.
no.
Had you and your companions gone to the theater I think you may have testified about this, gone to the theater before you went to the mall?
Yes,
And then would you have returned by way of Edgewood Road, or what route would you have taken to get back to the mall?
probably Edgewood Road to Williams Boulevard.
Okay. And those are the two main thoroughfares that kind of abutted Westdale Mall. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Those are all the questions I have for you.
Thank you.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Price. You may step down.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will adjourn. We will be in recess until 1:30 this afternoon. So I would again ask you to keep in mind that admonition. Don't make up your mind. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. But we will stand in recess until 1:30.
Please rise for the jury. You can leave your notebooks on your chairs.